almost 40% of the population pay fees to attend a school in Australia.
Ever tell us a little bit about EdStart?
The original vision for it was to take the power of technology to make it dramatically easier for people to pay for education. I do want to prove a point that there is a way to use the great power of business or capitalism for good.
What does success look like for you?
I would feel successful if I felt like I'd had a positive impact on a fair number of people.
A couple of tips that you might have wanted to tell yourself.
One would have to be around
Private markets investments are investors can find some real value. I find the best way to learn is learn from someone who's done it before and given it a go. Hi, I'm Travis Miller, host of Grow Your Wealth podcast. Thanks for joining me here today. On these podcast sessions, we're going to talk through how certain investors have navigated the bumpy road of investing, whether it be through business or investments in general. Thanks for listening today. Welcome back to the Grow Your Wealth podcast, where we bring you insightful conversation with industry leaders to help you navigate the world of finance and investments. I'm your host, Travis Miller, and today we have a very special guest, Jack Stevens, joining us. Today we'll delve into Jack's fascinating career, from his early days at uni creating small startups to holding senior consulting and corporate finance roles at KPMG prior to founding EdStart in 2016. We'll also explore some of the key lessons he learned along the way and his strong personal passion for education that led to creating a fintech platform to fund the most powerful, transformative investment anyone can make, and that's education. So without further ado, let's dive into a conversation with Jack. Welcome, Jack. How about we start at the beginning? Give us a bit of a summary, kind of who you are and kind of what you're up to at the moment.
Great to be here, Travis. The quick backstory, I guess, is beginning in the depths of far north Queensland. And
Gotcha.
that's where I was lucky enough to grow up, in a pretty small town called Mission Beach.
Yep.
Parents are school teachers up there, and pretty idyllic childhood, really. But far north Queensland is a different world. You know, you got Queensland and you got North Queensland and you got far north Queensland. And
is this far north Queensland?
This is pretty much up right up there. It's a bit of its own country, which is great in many ways. So that was really amazing kind of upbringing. And of course, you get to the end of your sort of schooling period up there, and you realise that if you want to do anything much other than banana farming or sugarcane farming, you got to get out of there. And
Gotcha.
so I was pretty motivated by the end of school to get out of there. But there was a few things that really inspired me along the way. But long story short, I got a scholarship to go away to Bond University.
That's pretty good.
And wouldn't have otherwise been able to go
Did
there.
your parents take credit for that as teachers?
Well, to an extent, I think, and so they should. But that really was then, a whole nother world of transformation, being able to go there and just learn a lot of stuff really quickly, and really inspired that entrepreneurial vibe that I really already had. I really had quite a fascination with business and entrepreneurialism, even being very young. But going off to Bond and being immersed in a very entrepreneurial environment was amazing, and absolutely loved that. And that ultimately then realised I had to get a real job and went on to KPMG, but we circled back to entrepreneurialism, where we're at today.
Gotcha. And what did you study at uni?
Just commerce and business, so across sort of finance and accounting.
Any good marks or?
Yeah,
how'd you go?
Great marks. Academically, I found that side of it, relatively easy in a way, and I graduated top of the class. But
Gotcha.
that wasn't the main game there.
Yeah,
The thing about great universities are the cohort of people around you. And I think that was the bit that, was most important.
You still got contacts from uni days?
Very much so. Very much so.
What about Mission Beach?
Less so. But most of the people I went to school with also moved away.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've gone on to do all sorts of interesting stuff. But still keep in touch with a lot of folks from uni days, and many of whom still close with. So.
No, sounds good. So how we go through that early career? So you've obviously did well at uni. Did you go into a grad job, was it, or what was next?
Exactly. Yeah. And through the uni period, I was highly motivated to go out and start a business straight away. And even did a few of those things, on a small scale during the process. But you realize pretty quick that there's a lot you don't know.
It's true. Yeah.
Especially at that point. And there was a real sense that I needed to go and get a real job for a bit.
Gotcha.
But tried to pick something where I could learn a lot about business very quickly.
Gotcha.
And KPMG was a great place to do that. And also, a few people gave me that advice about just getting some fundamental skill set.
For sure.
You go out, get that fundamental skill. And in my case, got the accounting qualification as well along the way. You've always got that then.
Yeah, for sure.
You're super employable.
Yeah.
You've always got that. And having those really strong finance and accounting fundamentals have actually served me incredibly well.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, right? Because you go out to be an entrepreneur, caution to the wind. You've got a base, right? You can always go back and be an accountant and do whatever where it all started.
Absolutely.
Okay, now a couple of people who have influenced you through your life.
Yeah, there's many. I think if you go back to school days, and we'll come to talk more about education, but everybody remembers great teachers for your whole life, really. Yep. And there was certainly a few there through high school that were just incredibly motivating in the sense that they helped you to see a bigger picture that maybe you couldn't see at that time.
Gotcha.
And maybe they encouraged you to do things that you didn't even think were possible. And it's that small little nudges along the way that, when people kind of believe you and back you and encourage you, were super important. So there's a couple of people there that had a big impact. And then the same sort of thing at university as well, where, there was a whole heap of opportunities that were out there, but, you sort of in many ways needed a bit of a nudge to push out of the comfort zone to go and do that. And so there was a few people in that stage as well that led me to doing some pretty interesting stuff. And like, just to pick one example, we ended up just on the side there at university going off to a competition, a business management competition, where we ended up winning the Australian comp and then getting sent to Russia.
What was the competition on?
Called the Global Management Challenge. And what it was like a simulated business operation over a series of time. You had to make decisions across a whole heap of areas. But result of that was this incredible experience getting sent over to represent Australia at the international level and in Russia of all places. So a really quirky, amazing experience. But then out of that, you learn a lot, you meet a lot of great people. And I think if you had to pick the theme from that, it's those people that inspire you by way of pushing you a bit outside the comfort zone, or maybe encouraging you to do something hard that have really, resulted in the big gains.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please subscribe on whatever platform you're using. It helps us build a community. We want to educate investors, and this is what it's all about. Is that something as far as your workplace now? Is that something you take to the workplace? Are you pushing people along, give them a little kick in the backside?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And for most humans, it is very natural to want to stay in your comfort zone. And so encouraging people and giving them the confidence to try something that's a little bit hard generally has been a great strategy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people need to learn to fail, right?
Totally. And that's the other thing. And it's one of the big challenges if you compare, I think, a startup to an established business is when you don't have a safe space in which to fail.
Yeah.
And if you've got a layer of, or many layers of management that don't really accept failure as an option, then you're going to stay safe. So yeah, a startup gives you a great space to do that because you can tell people go and have a crack and give them a safe way to be able to make those mistakes.
Yeah, and learn from it, right? How about some pivotal moments? Tell us through your life when there was a day or a week when something occurred or you did something that turned the dial, made a difference in your life?
I think the one vivid memory in the school days, which has stayed with me for a long time, was an entrepreneurial experience at school. This is about age 15, where as part of the business class, had the opportunity to go and actually start a business.
Gotcha.
And it was a silly kind of business, but the lesson from it I found to be quite game changing. And what the business was worm farming, vermiculture to use technical term.
Yeah.
And we had this idea that you could run a commercial scale worm farm in the town.
Yeah.
You would then take waste from all different sources.
Food and stuff, yeah.
Exactly. And you could produce incredibly cheaply, actually a pretty high quality product being a fertilizer.
Gotcha.
And that was the basic concept. You can kind of see how that all fit together. And the really pivotal thing though, or memory out of that, was this realization that you could have a business that did something good, and you could use the power of business or capitalism, if you like, to really do good at scale.
For sure.
So in that example, it sort of struck me at one point that, in order to do this, you needed some financial resource. The way to acquire that financial resource was to offer people a return.
For sure. Yep.
And if you could do that, if you can generate that return, people will provide the financial resource, and in turn would enable this scalability of something that was actually doing good.
Yeah.
And the business model itself was great because you're taking your input cost, which is waste, which is either free or sometimes people were willing to pay you for it to take it away. So you almost had like a negative input cost. Selling a great product and at the same time having a pretty positive impact. But then you realize that no one's going to give you money for that just because it feels good. Yes, there's a concept of charity and there's a concept of government and those sorts of things, but that's not really scalable. But if you could be profitable and offer a return, then you could almost scale that thing, to a huge extent. So, and that really changed my whole perspective then, because I was like, well, I previously thought about business as making money and other things as doing good, and realized that if you could wrap a business model around something good, you could really then do good on a grand scale. That has really struck me at the time, and it stayed with me.
It's a pretty cool lesson at 15. That's just the basics of commerce, wasn't it?
That's right.
And your negative input was pretty cool as well.
Exactly. Negative cost of goods sold. Yeah.
It's pretty good. Okay, now, I mean, you've sort of answered this question to a degree, right? But sort of what drives you in business? And I think clearly both your parents were teachers and you're very sort of intertwined with the educational system now, basically. But yeah, what drives you in business?
Definitely that's an element of it. So it's a good example. My parents are recently retired. They can look back on their career, like we're talking about. You remember a good teacher for your whole life. So there's probably hundreds or thousands of people out there that remember them.
Yeah, true.
And what an amazing thing to be able to get to the end of your career and have that. You think, wow, that felt like I've had an impact and done something positive. So I definitely am driven by wanting to have that kind of impact or feel like you've done something useful. That's kind of one key element of it. The other is, I guess, building on that education concept. Education did completely change my life. I went from a rural town of 2,000 people where your job options were bananas or sugarcane to within a very short space of time entering a whole different world and a whole world that I didn't know anything about beforehand. So that transformational power of education, which looks through socioeconomic status and it looks through a whole heap of other maybe background and context of an individual to allow someone to transform is super powerful. And I think that if you can accelerate that, enable that at the margin, you're having a major impact. If you take one individual, give them a great education, and see what that ultimately results in, it is hugely powerful.
I agree.
And you can see that anywhere in the world at pretty much any level of education.
Yeah.
You educate a population, and it transforms that entire country more than any other tool that's available to us. So that really was one of the key drivers for this business at EdStart, which is to say, well, if we can at the margin get one more person to have a great education, then the impact of that's huge, and then think about scaling that up. So for me, that's probably the key driver, and also I do believe that you can have a business model that has it all, where you have delighted customers, you have a really happy team, a really happy group of employees, and also be profitable, and also be a self-sustaining business model. I think that is possible.
I agree.
And I'm trying. I guess I'm driven to prove that point.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to learn more about alternative assets, there's a book here you can read, How You Grow Your Wealth with Alternative Assets. Now back to the episode. Ever tell us a little bit about EdStart? Like, I'm sure there's a few listeners putting their children through school at the moment.
Yeah, EdStart, really the original vision for it was to take the power of technology, and we could say fintech, I guess, technology in the financial space, to make it dramatically easier for people to pay for education. And the concept was if that you can do that in any education sector, you can have a great impact. Access to education, finance payment is often a barrier to that. And so if you make that easier, then you can have a big impact. So that was the original vision. Where we got started with EdStart was, we're based in Australia. What's the biggest education sector? What's the biggest pain point?
Yep.
And here it is the case that for K-12 or P-12 education, you have a huge chunk of the population paying fees for that. In fact, almost 40% of the population pay fees to attend a school in Australia. And so that becomes a massive pain point. It becomes a massive category of household spend, the second largest category after housing for that 40% of the population. And it was pretty, and remains pretty difficult, pretty clunky, pretty hard to do compared to paying for a lot of other things. So we started there, and what we tried to build from scratch was a fintech platform and a new product, a new way of thinking that made it dramatically easier for people to pay for education. And so from that point, the first family, the first 100 families has evolved. It started out as, I guess, a very tailored and quite unique payment plan sort of product aimed at parents, but has since evolved into a much more comprehensive fee management platform for schools.
Gotcha.
And in fact, the bulk of what we do these days is provide a product and a platform that schools use to administer their fees across the board for all of their parents.
Gotcha. So it's become more of a technology business.
Very much so. And it was always tech forward, tech driven, but I guess it moved away from more of a consumer payment plan type of product to a broader software offering that schools use. Funding is an element of that, but it's much broader than that.
Gotcha. You ever worked out how many families you've helped?
Well, indeed,
is there a number?
We have supported over 43,000 students so far. And if you multiply all that out, we've touched the lives in terms of parents and students of well over 100,000.
It's good.
And across the majority of schools, if we look at every single school that we've paid in Australia, it's certainly the majority. So, we're getting there. It's still a small percentage of the total.
Gotcha. Pretty amazing for a business you invented at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. And that's the joy of being able to build something is that although you don't do it too often, when you sit back and think about it and you're like, that thing didn't exist before and now it does and it's impacting a lot of people, and that's
exactly. We're talking earlier about how many How many staff you've got as well, right? So you've created careers and jobs for team members too, is the other part of the project.
Indeed, and that's really cool. It's north of 70 people now, continuing to grow. But the idea that you can give people, not just work, but work that they enjoy, meaningful work, a space where they can grow and develop, is fantastic. And that's one of the great joys. And you would have witnessed that as well, as seeing people grow and develop and improve.
Exactly. Now, on the entrepreneur side, what advice would you give someone taking the leap? So you're at KPMG, probably getting paid a nice salary. You would have had a nice career path. You made the jump out. What advice would you give to someone thinking about the same sort of decision?
It's interesting because most people that have asked me for advice on that topic in the last 7 or 8 years, I've just said, don't do it.
Yeah.
You get a nice salary every month that you don't need to think about.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds great.
You're not watching the bank balance every minute of the day.
Yeah. So I think I was lucky in a sense that dabbled in a few things before, had known plenty of people that had started businesses. I had a somewhat reasonable idea of how difficult it is.
Yeah.
And that's probably the key thing or key piece of advice that I give to people is you've got to have a really good reason for doing it.
Yeah.
Because if your reason is just that you think you can make some money, it's probably not enough.
For sure.
Because it's going to be so hard. There's going to be so many hard things that you could never even dream up. There's so many unknowns that you probably you'll need to be deeply motivated beyond just the financial side of things to keep going. So that's kind of my main piece of advice. And then my second follow-up to that is, if you're going to do it, because it is super hard, if you're going to do it, make sure it's something worthwhile and make sure it's something that can get big.
Yeah.
If you're really going to put all this effort into something that ultimately is just doesn't really have the potential to be super large or to have a major impact, then maybe broaden your horizons and think about, well, okay, you're going to jump in, it's going to be tough, but give yourself a shot at doing something that could be pretty big, could have a big impact.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I think looking at your business, it must be 7 to 8 years now, right? Because you're going to put a lot of years into it. It doesn't work overnight, right? So you're actually probably looking at, say, a 10-year project.
Absolutely.
And so if you're going to do a 10-year project, you want to pick the right project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Makes sense. And so what's worked for you? A couple of things you got right.
The fundamentals that we got right, probably the most important one was the early team, the early group of people. And I'm sure you feel the same, whether it's a co-founder or whether it's a group of people in that first couple of years that are around you, when you're going on that 0 to 1 type phase, you're just creating everything from nothing. Getting that fundamental group of people right is incredibly important, because that really is what the business is.
For sure.
The business ultimately is just a group of people, really, especially in that early period. And so if you can get that group pretty right, then the entire culture, the entire design of the business, the entire experience for customers becomes good. And I think we got certainly very lucky, but we're also pretty careful about that first group of people.
Gotcha.
And some of which, many of which are still there with us today.
Gotcha.
I think that's probably the number one.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, it tends to always be about people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, not that AI might take over one day. Until then, humans are important, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So what hasn't worked? A couple of failures. Or learnings, I think they call them these days.
Yeah. It is good to try and learn from them. There are many. I think in the early days, this is a trap that we fell into that many others I've seen over time have as well. But we definitely made the error here where we thought too much about the product, about how to operate it, about the technical aspects of it,
Gotcha.
and not enough about how to sell it.
Gotcha.
So not enough about the distribution.
Yes, you build the best
sales and
widget.
marketing. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And so you can't underestimate how important in any business that let's broadly call it distribution, getting it, finding customers and getting it into their hands is so critically important. And despite you can have the best product in the world, and if no one knows about it, then it's no good.
True.
So I think we had that balance wrong at the start, and that probably cost us, I would say, multiple years in terms of the overall horizon of the business.
It's true.
It took us some time to catch up.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening. It's funny how similar businesses is. I'm more obviously funds management side of things, but if you don't have investors looking to invest in your product, you can be the best fund manager in the world.
Exactly.
If you don't have an investor, you're not a fund manager, right?
That's right.
It's very similar. It's just distribution.
Yep.
Investors.
And naturally, it's obviously a natural thing. You're in there, you're trying to create a new product, you gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't matter if you have the best product in the world and you've got no customers. Then what's the point?
Got to focus on both ultimately, don't you?
Absolutely.
Now, I've sort of on that front of learnings, what about tips? If you were to look back in 20 years' time, a couple of tips that you might have wanted to tell yourself.
The probably critical tips, I think, one would have to be around not getting caught up in the business being all-consuming.
Yeah.
So trying to remember that that your life is broader than just this business, and that it's really important to have the other parts of your life in check.
Yeah, gotcha.
In terms of partner or friends or
exercise,
health, all these things. None of those are worth sacrificing for a business, in my view.
Yep.
So to me, I think mostly I kept that on track, but there's certainly times where I didn't. And you see plenty of people, and I know plenty of founders that have found that really tough. They feel like they've sacrificed way too much.
Yeah, I got you.
And I don't think that's worth it. I don't think that's ever worth it. So for me, that's be a pretty strong tip to myself and to others.
To get balance in your life. Yep.
Yeah, you only get one life, and it's incredibly short. And I can tell you that, and you would know this too. I mean, I've met a heap of wealthy people in recent years. Most of them are unhappy. I don't think it's the secret to but having that other stuff in check, health and relationships and all that stuff tends to be vastly more important.
Yeah, you're leading very well into my next questions. And so, definition of success. What does success look like for you?
I think if I got to the later stages of this business, or even the later stages of my life, I would feel successful if I felt like I'd had a positive impact on a fair number of people.
Gotcha.
And that could be customers, it could be team members, or it could just be other people in your life that you've had an impact on. I get a lot of satisfaction out of kind of feeling like you've done something good for other people. So for me, that's probably the number one success factor.
Gotcha. And outside of work, do you want to sail around the world, or is there any goals you got in your life?
I guess
the left field one for you.
Yeah, the ideal future state there would be to see the world. There's no doubt about that. But I think creating something that's self-sustaining, that's still trying to deliver on that impact that we're trying to have.
Yep.
And I'm talking there about broadly education. So if I could create a world where you can see that something there will be self-sustaining, it'll be ongoing long after I'm gone, that helps enable and support education, then I think that for me would be ticking a big box.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Similar question. What legacy are you living? Is your approach to the workplace, approach to life?
I think in terms of a legacy, it comes a bit back to that earlier point I was making about wanting to prove a point. I do want to prove a point that there is a way to use the great power of business or capitalism for good.
Yep.
And I think that this is a great example of that. EdStart's trying to be a great example of that. But I think that there is much more that I'd like to do as well.
Yeah, gotcha.
You know, I feel like this is just one example of so many other things where you could apply that same logic.
Yeah, gotcha.
Where there's a lot of problems to be solved.
Yep.
And wrapping a business model around something which makes it self-sustaining, which attracts resources to it.
Yeah.
If I can prove that point and show some examples of it happening in real life, then that's probably the legacy that
I think it makes sense, right? You don't have to solve every problem yourself, right? Exactly. You can help other people see the problem, and the others may take on and find the solution for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, on to some quick fire questions. I like this first one. What was your first job? And you can go as young as you want to go.
So first job was in a fish and chip shop.
Yeah, gotcha.
In a small town, and that was many great lessons.
Were you cooking the chips?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, good job. Piece of advice for your younger self.
I think piece of advice for younger self is to just dream a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Yep. The world's a big place. Don't sell yourself short.
Yep. Good one. What motivates you the most as a person?
Really, I think the people around me. So seeing people around you being better, growing, developing, being happy, feeling like you've had a positive impact on them.
Yep, brilliant. Tips for driving long-term wealth.
The amazing, unbelievable, totally underappreciated effect of compounding.
Yeah, for sure.
Compounding. See it at all scales, like just put some money in an ETF and let it sit there, you see it. But in terms of a technology business, if you see the effect, because it's really exaggerated in a tech-driven business, the effect of that compounding at scale is unbelievable. It really is.
You know, it's amazing the amount of people I chat to on this show that say compound interest is one of the most powerful things, and it's just investing on top of itself. Oh. It's a nice simple concept, and when interest rates go up, it's even better.
That's right.
Okay, biggest mistake you see people make when trying to create wealth?
Just greed, I think.
Yeah.
Just short-termism, greed. Not seeing the bigger picture. The short-term gain, in my view, is just never worth it.
Yeah, the get rich quick doesn't make sense. You've been cracking at your business for 8 years. I've been like watching it from the outside, continuing to see it grow, but I know it hasn't happened in a year.
That's right.
When you're not working, how do you spend your time?
I really love living in Sydney.
It's a great city.
And when you live in Sydney, you've got to make the most of the great things about Sydney. Yeah. And that for me is the natural beauty, the harbour.
Yeah, for sure.
I get out on a kayak. It's like the poor man's boat. I can't afford a boat, but I can afford a kayak. Yeah. And, just that simple natural beauty is just amazing. And I think, there's great things and there's negative things about every city, and you just try to make the most of the great ones.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I grew up in country Victoria, and sometimes you see the harbour and think just what an amazing city it is.
Unbelievable.
Nice blue sky. Yeah. Anyway, appreciate you coming in, Jack. Really, really good to have a chat. And anyone who's interested in connecting with Jack, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, and we'll include the link in the show notes. Thanks again, Jack.
Thanks, Travis.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, please leave a review. It's really important to us. We're trying to build momentum around education, and better reviews will get more people coming and listening.